The galaxy had grown used to humanity's quiet. For 4 millennia, their fleets lay docked, their generals retired, their weapons mothballed in vaults of stone and ice. The stories of old wars, of Terran ferocity, and the relentless will that once brought empires to their knees had slipped into myth whispered by alien historians who half believed them themselves. Humanity had no need to fight. Their colonies thrived across hundreds of stars, bound together by trade, diplomacy, and an unshakable sense of dignity. To most of the galaxy, they had become the keepers of peace, strange creatures once feared but now trusted. It was in this long silence that the Empire made its mistake. The Galactic Empire stretched across a quarter of known space, a web of worlds bound by iron decrees and a hierarchy enforced through fear. They had tolerated humanity because it was convenient, yet they watched the humans with suspicion, dismissing their smiles as masks, their restraint as weakness. Among the Imperial elite, an idea took root. The humans had grown too soft. If tested, they would yield. What better test than to take what no species could live without? On New Carthage, a fertile colony on the rim, the children gathered in the plaza for the Festival of Voices. Every year, young and old stood beneath lanterns that swayed like tiny stars, singing songs in a dozen tongues. Humanity prided itself on teaching children the chorus of the galaxy, songs of peace shared between species. That evening, under the watchful eyes of families and visitors, the children laughed, sang, and danced in the square. No one saw the shadows descend until it was too late. The Empire's ships did not roar when they entered the atmosphere. They whispered, sleek and black, cloaked in fields that bent light and sound. By the time the first screams cut across the music, the plaza had already fractured into panic. Children were seized in shimmering nets, voices muffled by restraints, their small hands reaching for parents they would never touch again. In less than 10 minutes, dozens were taken. The ships vanished into the night sky as suddenly as they came, leaving only smoke and silence. The grief that followed was unbearable. Mothers collapsed to their knees in the plaza. Fathers clawed at the stones where the nets had dragged their sons and daughters away. Neighbors embraced one another, their festival ruined by the bitter taste of fear. Word spread through the colony before the embers had cooled, and from the colony it spread to the stars. Within days, the entire species knew the Empire had stolen their children. Admiral Kalen Vey was among the first to stand before the Council of Humanity. He was an old man by appearance, silver-haired and lined by years, though his body was strong, and his mind sharper still. 4,000 years of peace had not erased his memories of war. He had lived long enough to see humanity's last battles, and the ghosts of them still haunted his nights. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of steel. They will not stop with this, he told the council. The Empire probes. They test us. If we bow, they will take more, not just children, not just one world. They will strip us until we are hollow. Others on the council resisted his words. Chancellor Illyra of the Corps spoke for them. She was measured, her voice calm, her faith in diplomacy unshaken. We have not drawn a weapon in 4 millennia, Admiral. We will not break that legacy for rash vengeance. The Empire will be brought to account by words, not blood. Kalen's eyes darkened. They stole our children. Words will not buy them back. In the galleries above, citizens had gathered to listen. They carried banners painted with the names of the missing children, their faces silent, but their eyes aflame. When the Chancellor spoke of patience, murmurs of dissent rippled through the crowd. When Kalen spoke of strength, those murmurs became applause. The Council sent envoys to the Empire. Their request was simple: return the children unharmed, and peace would endure. The Empire's reply was neither swift nor courteous. A month passed in silence, during which hope withered on every human world. Then the answer arrived, carried by an Imperial ambassador whose robes shimmered like oil. Before the full council and the watching citizens, he bowed low, but his voice dripped with contempt. The children are in our custody, he said. They will be raised as wards of the Empire, taught the discipline your decadent culture denies them. You should thank us for giving them purpose. The chamber erupted. Shouts of rage drowned the translator's voice. Parents screamed curses from the galleries. Some tried to leap down into the chamber before guards restrained them. The ambassador smiled. "Peace has made you soft," he sneered. "You will do nothing." He was escorted out, untouched, though Kalen's hands trembled with the urge to end him then and there. The message spread like fire. Across the colonies, humans filled the streets, not with chants for diplomacy, but with demands for war. In mining towns on Titan, workers raised their drills like weapons and shouted for vengeance. On distant Arcturus Prime, entire universities marched together, professors and students carrying banners painted crimson. The call was universal: bring them back. Make them pay. In the silence of her office, Chancellor Illyra wept. She had built her life on peace, had believed with all her being that humanity was beyond the cruelty of war. Yet, as she watched the images of millions crying out across the stars, she knew her era had ended. Peace had been stolen along with those children. The council convened for the final time as a government of peace. Kalen stood before them again, his gaze sweeping over faces that had once doubted him. He saw the fear in their eyes now, the grief, the anger. He knew what they were about to decide, but the gravity of it still weighed on him. "Understand what you awaken," he told them. "Humanity is not built for half measures. Once we rise, we will not stop until our children are safe and those who took them are ashes. If you choose war, you do not choose vengeance alone. You choose fire, unending, until the galaxy remembers us again." The chamber held its breath. Then the vote was called. One by one, the counselors cast their decision. Each time the word war rang out, the galleries above erupted in cheers until the chamber shook with sound. By the end, the tally was unanimous. For the first time in 4,000 years, humanity declared war. Kalen stood still in the roar of voices, his heart heavy yet burning. He thought of the children's faces, small and frightened, and he swore to them silently. He swore that they would come home. He swore that those who mocked humanity would learn why peace had lasted so long, because humanity had chosen to keep its weapons sheathed, not because it lacked them. And in that oath the war began. The vaults opened with a sound like thunder. Deep within asteroids carved hollow in secret ages ago, ships stirred from their slumber. They were relics of another time, leviathans of metal and fire built when humanity had been feared rather than dismissed. Their hulls bore the scars of battles fought before most civilizations had risen, but when power coursed through their veins again, they seemed alive. Lights blazed, engines thrummed. The war machine humanity had hidden away awoke. Admiral Kalen Vey stood on the bridge of the Resolute, an ancient dreadnought whose hull stretched for kilometers. The crew around him were young, too young he thought, but their eyes burned with the same fire he remembered from centuries past. They had not fought wars before, but they had studied them. Humanity's histories were meticulous, its training relentless, as though some instinct had always known the day would come again. Kalen's voice was steady as he addressed them. "We go not for conquest," he said, his gaze sweeping over the officers at their stations. "We go for our children. Every decision you make, every shot you fire, remember why. We fight not because we crave war. We fight because peace was broken." The Resolute led the first strike. Intelligence revealed an Empire listening post near the border, lightly defended yet vital. It was not chosen for conquest, but for message. When the fleet emerged from Slipstream, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. The Empire's defenders laughed at first. Human ships were ancient, outdated, their numbers few. But when the first salvo struck, laughter died. Human weapons did not roar with brute force alone. They struck with precision born of patience. Rail cannons fired shards of tungsten that sliced through Imperial shielding like glass. Electronic warfare suites screamed across channels, blinding enemy sensors. Fighters darted like sparks, piloted by men and women whose hands were steady with a focus that came from desperation. The listening post was ash before an hour had passed. Not a single human ship was lost. Across the Empire, the shock was palpable. Generals who had dismissed humans as relics demanded reports twice, 3 times, unable to believe. The idea of humanity as warriors had been a legend. Now the legend walked again, wrapped in steel and flame. Yet the Empire did not yield. They answered with fleets larger than anything humanity could field. At every star, human ships faced impossible odds. Kalen watched from the Resolute's command deck as tactical screens filled with red, enemy vessels outnumbering them 5-1, sometimes more. His officers trembled, but Kalen only nodded. Then we will remind them, he said, that numbers do not win wars. Resolve does. Humanity fought like no other. They did not meet force with force, but with ingenuity. Fleets vanished into nebulae, striking from cover before disappearing again. Mining colonies detonated their own asteroids, turning fields of rock into traps that shredded imperial armadas. On frozen moons, guerrilla fighters emerged from beneath the ice to ambush ground forces, retreating into tunnels before the enemy could retaliate. Every battle, no matter how small, became a story, and every story spread. The galaxy watched. Races long subdued under imperial rule whispered among themselves. They had seen rebellions before, always crushed, but this was different. Humans did not surrender. Even when ships burned, their crews fought to the last. Even when captured, they escaped, turning their own chains into weapons. The stories grew, and with them the myth. But Kalen knew myth would not bring the children home. For that, something greater was required. Word reached him of their location at last. The imperial capital, the heart of the beast. The children had been paraded as trophies, proof of the Empire's dominance. They were to be educated, stripped of identity, molded into servants. Kalen felt his chest tighten as he listened. He thought of their small hands, their wide eyes. He thought of his own granddaughter, taken from New Carthage, her name, Lyra, engraved in his heart like a wound. "Prepare the Black Lance," he ordered. The Black Lance was no fleet. It was a whisper, a shadow, a special operations unit forged in secrecy. Men and women who had trained not only in combat, but in silence, infiltration, the art of becoming invisible until the moment they struck. They volunteered without hesitation, each one carrying the same vow. Bring the children home, whatever the cost. Their journey into the capital was a blade drawn through the dark. They moved through patrols and minefields, cloaked in tech older than the Empire itself, artifacts of humanity's forgotten wars. When at last they breached the palace walls, they found the children confined in crystalline chambers, frightened but alive. The rescue was not clean. Guards discovered them, alarms blazed, and corridors erupted in fire. The Black Lance fought with desperation, shields collapsing, rifles burning in their hands. But through it all, they carried the children. Lyra clung to her rescuer's neck, whispering through tears that she wanted to go home. And home they went, bleeding but unbroken, as the palace crumbled in chaos behind them. When the news reached humanity's worlds, the galaxy shook. The children were safe. The Empire's greatest fortress had been infiltrated and defiled, its pride shattered. Kalen stood before the council once more, not as a man demanding war, but as one delivering its fruits. "The message has been sent," he said. His voice was hoarse, heavy with the weight of command. "They know now what we are. They know what lines must never be crossed again. If they value their future, they will return our people, and they will never touch what is ours." And the Empire, humiliated, bleeding from 1,000 cuts, capitulated. They returned prisoners, they withdrew their forces, and for the first time in centuries, they signed a treaty not as conquerors, but as equals. Yet, the galaxy did not return to silence. The myth of humanity had awoken. Across subjugated worlds, whispers spread of resistance, of freedom. Where once the Empire had ruled unchallenged, now fear gnawed at its edges. Kalen looked out over the stars from the bridge of the Resolute. The children were home. Humanity had shown the galaxy why peace had endured so long, because humanity had allowed it. But he knew in his heart that nothing would ever be the same. The peace they had once known was gone, and in its place was something harder, sharper. Still, when Lyra ran to him, arms outstretched, and he lifted her into his embrace, he let himself believe for a moment that perhaps the war had been worth its cost. He pressed his forehead against hers and whispered, so softly that only she could hear, "They will never take you again." Beyond the viewport, the stars burned bright and cold, and humanity's name was once again spoken with awe and fear.